Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Meltwater Finals. This is day number 5. Now, I took a little bit of a break between rounds 2 and 5, so today we skipped 2 rounds. That's because there weren't any massive matchups head-to-head, and also I did give you a warning right before we got started that although we would be consistent, I can't always promise I'm going to make a recap of every single day, but today we have Magnus, Carlsen, and Hikaru Nakamura in the main event, among other interesting matchups. Essentially, Magnus and Wesley are still first and second. Wesley is attempting to catch up as fast as possible, and there's like a 3 or 4 person tie for race, not tie, but race for third spot. So, all right, without further ado, let us jump into the games. We're going to do a game from each matchup and then 2 from the matchup between Magnus Carlsen and Hikaru Nakamura. And if you skip ahead, I'm going to smack your face into next week. No, actually, you're free to do whatever you want. That's why the timestamps are there. E4, this is game number 3 between Duda and MVL. Duda just lost with the black pieces, so he's looking to make a resurgence here in game number 3. If he loses this one, he loses the match in the rapid portion. Now, MVL plays a6, because that's what MVL does. He plays the Knight or Sicilian, and Duda plays Bishop 2e3, which is one of the main lines. Now we have e5, which is common, and actually here, White can move this knight literally anywhere. I mean, not here, and not there, and not there. So not really anywhere, but sort of anywhere. You get what I'm saying. No? Fine. Knight b3, Bishop e6, and White here makes a beeline for a long castles, and Black makes a beeline for his short castles. Watch, you don't believe me? Both sides castle almost as quickly as possible. This is like vintage Najdorf English attack, even though the gentleman playing it in this game is Polish. White is going to do 2 things. Attack here and win control of d5. Black is going to do 2 things. Attack here and try to either not lose control of d5 completely or allow it, and then just, it doesn't really matter. So like win control of other squares. Okay, knight d7. Obviously just developing. This knight is still staying flexible as to where it's going to go. Probably it will land on c4 in the future. Yeah, as promised, here's the move g4, here's the move g5, knight h5, and rook g1. All right, looks very, very scary. Knight b6. I think here's the main problem between these 2 players landing in this position. I think MVL just has a little bit more experience because he's played this all the time. I don't know if Duda and MVL have played like this sharp position ever before, but probably. I mean, they've played each other many, many times. Although Duda's a little bit of a later joiner of these top events, so I don't exactly know how much experience he's built up. Queen f2. Queen f2 attacks the knight on b6, so the knight just continues its journey to c4. And he takes it because it's just, you can't lose this bishop. That's not the right bishop to lose. This bishop really strong, defends g5, also fights over here. This bishop hasn't moved, so... All right, knight to c5. Now, you can't take this because rook takes queen. Simple enough. However, the queen just moves out of the way, and now this knight actually is hanging, so it has to go to a4. But both pawns have been blocked, and this elastic band of horses actually does a pretty good job protecting the queen side. The problem is, all things equal, now they can't really move, so you gotta make a decision what you're gonna do with the knights. Duda decides to move that knight to d5, because I told you the whole battle is for the d5 square. And we have a big trade. So it actually kind of looks like White has won the battle for the d5 square. But it's not so fast. Queen b7. Okay, queen b7 creates a threat on b2. Duda somehow, by some miracle, sees it. I mean, I don't know. Wow, I didn't even know. I can't see queens from like 2-3 squares away. To see it from 5 squares away is pretty nuts. Queen defends the pawn. Nice little defensive move here. I'm joking. I'm trying to insert some humor here so you keep paying attention and don't just get bored like on most chess videos. So c3, f5, queen e2. Now f5, I gotta give credit to my man MVL, because what the hell is this? I mean, I can en passant you, and now you just open up my rook toward your king. I mean, are you sure you want to do this? I don't know. He's MVL. He does what he wants. And he doesn't even like, he doesn't even push. Like right now, if he plays this move f4, for example, it closes that side of the board, so that side can't be opened again. He not shook. He just decided, like, you're not going to attack me. You could do your best. And by the way, remember that d5 square? Yeah, whoever said you won the battle for it. Rook b5. And now if you take, it's interesting. Black actually has a choice between which way to take. Probably he would do this, so this is always guarded. And now the a file has a new potential weapon, and he can play d5. And if he can play d5, he probably will just be completely fine. So, rook d1, rook f6, queen g2, takes. And now is a difficult decision, because on the one hand, you want to play this move and continue to win the battle for the d5 square. On the other hand, that pawn you threw over there, it's going to die. I mean, you just pushed it way too far, and you don't have enough pieces to create an attack anymore. So I'm going to go here at some point, and then you're dead, because you're going to lose the pawn, and then I'm going to attack you. Okay, so Duda decides, I'm good with the center, let's close it up. I don't want it anymore, I'm going to go defend my pawn. MVL's like, that's fantastic, because my queen is so strong, I can go that way and that way. Good luck defending all your whole position. F4. Plays E4. All right, protected pass pawn. Blocked only by the bishop. It's pass pawn as long as no pawns can block its way to the end. Queen D2, Queen E8, Queen G2, Queen B5. And obviously here are the player's repeated moves. Psych, although MVL does just kind of shuffle back and forth here like a maniac. And Rook D4. Now, Duda probably could have played Queen G2, and I think MVL would have actually been all right with a draw. I mean, he's just shuffling back and forth, so I'm assuming, you know, he already won one game. But Rook D4, and now the pawns get swamped, and now King H7, so there's no weakness on the back rank anymore. The king is pretty safe, and yeah, both sides are still trying to win the game. Queen takes D5, Rook D4, Queen C6 protects everything on the queen side. C4. Problem is that now black is just a pawn up, so MVL moves his rook forward. A3. What is Duda doing? Why is his king joining the... What? Do I not understand something about the game of chess? The king's like, actually, I'm good. I'm sorry, I overextended. I really shouldn't go that far. A4, and a couple moves later, the king actually went back to B3. Now, it's funny because not a whole lot has happened. Like, it just seems like absent-minded shuffling, but black is just completely winning here because this rook is just way too strong. King is way too weak, and, well, sometimes all it takes is one pawn push. Queen A7 is a really savage move. C5 can't take it. Bishop spin to the king. Look at this. Look at this slingshot. Queen A7, Queen F7. Rook is guarded, but the king's about to just get blown open. And, yeah, that move just disconnects everything. So, this... Duda tried to his credit, but MVL does get the win in the rapid portion. All right, second game. This is the, well, not the second game I'm going to show you. Is the fourth round between Artemiev and Mamedyarov. So this is 1.5 in this match. And Artemiev plays his ready. He loves this ready. He loves it. And we get what's known as a reverse Benoni. So C4, D4... It's kind of like a Benoni defense that's going to be played as long as this trade happens, and it does. It happens immediately. And Artemiev plays something I've never seen in my life. Like, normally, like, D3 is played, Rook E1, D3 is played, A3 to play B4 is played, Knight A3 to play Knight C2 or Knight B5 and try to go for this pawn is played. My dude just throws the horse in the middle of the board. He's like, let's go. And I think it's because black hasn't played Knight C6. Like, normally there's a knight on C6, so you can't put the knight here because there's going to be a trade. He's like, you haven't put the knight there, so I'm going to put my knight on E5. And a couple moves later, he tries to get rid of it. He just comes back. He plays Queen E2, and then he comes back. And I think the argument here of doing this is that you've made black develop in a bad way. This is really instructive. I mean, it's also way beyond the level of like the average chess viewer on YouTube. I mean, I'm not even, you know, sometimes I'm like sarcastic toward the viewer. I'm like, I poke fun at you guys. No, I'm like completely serious. The meta strategy of making an opponent's knight develop to a slightly suboptimal square is actually completely fascinating because now this pawn is left really difficult to defend. And if you defend it, black has now spent 2 tempi moving the queen. And white just jumps out with the knight to A3, is going to go knight B5, hit the bishop, hit the pawn. Also, B4 is really useful in a lot of these positions, further luring the pieces deeper into your territory. Yeah, and well, he plays D3, bishop F4, and yeah, I mean, if Mamedyarov doesn't play B4, he's just going to straight, if he allows B4, he's going to lose. Because normally the knight is on C6. So he plays this, and now he's like, well, the bishop's getting booted, okay? So for example, there would be take, knight C2, like queen E7, well, I mean, like queen B6 to defend this. Not really defended, but at least B4, C5, and it's just done. The game's done. So Mamedyarov's like, all right, I gotta go B5. Take, knight C2. All right, let me win this pawn. Let me defend my knight from the pin. Now we trade. And Mamedyarov is really good at creating counterplay. It's one thing he's just so good at. Doesn't matter if he's a pawn down, 2 pawns down, 3 pawns down, 4 pawns. I don't think he gets down 4 pawns, but whatever. Queen E4, Queen H6. And like he's sort of creating tactical tricks. Now Artemiev is like the opposite. He will destroy all your counterplay. That's a really mean move, queen f4. It now opens the rook. Of course, the queen trade is completely lost for black. So queen d6, and now he takes your second pawn. Or sorry, your center pawn, not your second pawn, your center pawn. I thought he was up 2 pawns, only up 1. It feels like more than that, though. And now just rook e3, and there is nothing that can be done. So rook e1 is coming. Black needs to play like bishop takes h3. I mean, it's a very desperate move, but it does have a trick. Like if I take back on h3, there is this. And it's never too late to allow a ton of counterplay and potentially lose the game. So rook f1, queen e6, and now Artemiev is like, yo, I see the easiest transformation of the position. Bang, 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 bang. So now I have knight and bishop for a rook. And you know what else I have? I have 4 on 2. 4 on 2 is far more powerful than 3 on 1. What's the difference between 4 and 2? 2. What's the difference between 3 and 1? 2. But 2 is not equal to 2. Welcome to Gotham Chess Recaps. Been a while since I said that, huh? Breaking the fourth wall here. I know, you know it, and I know it. It's been a while. Rook to e8, bishop to g2. And the thing is, in most endgames, bishop and knight are better than a rook. Like 9 times out of 10, because it's 2 things. You have 2 things that can do something. The rook can only do whatever the rook does. Left, right, up, down. All right, these pieces can zig and zag. All right, so the way you convert this, you got to mobilize the queen side or your pieces together, and he just does exactly that and just brings his pawns. Look at how beautiful his pieces are, and also escorted by the pawns. And finally takes on f7 just for good measure. And here black can actually play take, take, take and say, ho ho, I have won material. But first of all, you're down a pawn in an endgame, which is in a king and pawn endgame, being down a pawn is losing 99% of the time. And also you can't actually stop these pawns. I mean, the king is close and there's the concept of a square, but you can't get this because this goes and, well, I'll just push him. So you're out of moves. So Artemiev, after beating Magnus Carlsen, has now beaten Shakh Artemiev. I mean, Artemiev's just a killer. All right, Anish, Giri, Wesley So, this is a blitz game. They're tied going into the blitz, so they have to play blitz and potentially an Armageddon. And we have the Catalan. Bishop, d takes c4, bishop g2, and now knight c6. Knight c6 is it's a very interesting line. Immediately looking to put pressure on this and putting the knight in front of the c-pawn. But Wesley can do it. You can't. I always tell you not to do it just because Wesley can do it. Watch, but don't, do as I say, not as I do. Yeah. That's the right saying. All right, queen a4. Very common motif to pin this and try to play knight e5 and queen c4. So bishop b4 check. Black needs to win a little bit of time. Blocks out the bishop and defends this. This is pretty well known. Take, take, and castles. And essentially white's like, all right, bozo, you put your horses like this. Like, I'm going to kick it out, take this. I'm going to be good. Right, rook b8. Rook b8's a really clever move. The idea is to play b5. Attack the queen and defend this. Visually, these positions are like, they look really good. But once you prevent black from playing b5, and black continues to waste a little time, white just gets kind of the jump on black here with the bishop, the knight, the queen, the knight coming back this way. And this pawn is not going to be taken. Knight takes is you hang your king and then you lose. Queen takes d4, you run into knight c6, and it's just not good. So, castles. Takes, 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 takes. And white is left with definitely the pleasant ending. I mean, what is this? We got a pawn island, we got doubled c-pawns, no. But potential weakness on b2, and if black can take care of his weaknesses, his bishop is going to be better than the knight. It just is. It's a really good piece. So, knight e4 attacks the queen, offering a trade. And here, I think knight d2 is the way to go. Like, to try to trade queens, defend your pawn, trade on your terms. White is borderline already just dead one in this endgame because how bad black's structure is. Anish decides to take and plant his knight on c5. Who could blame the guy? The problem is, this costs you a pawn. It costs you a pawn to do this. And yes, you can put the rest of your pawns on dark squares, and my bishop can't get to them. But my bishop can sure as hell run a little labyrinth around all those pawns. So, rook c1, a5, knight b3, a4. He's like, bring the pawn forward. Wesley's like, I mean, if you insist, big man, I absolutely will. Now, remember we talked about black's really awful structure? All those 3 pawns are on the verge of death. Like, they can barely be defended. The first one falls. So what are you going to do if you're Wesley? He activates his rook, a3. Knight b4. I told you, all these pawns are on the verge of falling. Bishop e4. All right, the second pawn is about to fall with rook c7. But do you see what Wesley's done? He's left this rook to kind of linger, and he's going to play rook f6. And if he plays rook f6, and you play something like f4, they're like, ha-ha, you can't take my pawn. They just get destroyed. You either lose h2 and potentially g3, or you get mated, which is just a faster death. I mean, I don't know how this king is feeling about existing. But rook a2, looking to trade the rooks. Who could blame the guy? Now we begin a little pawn fighting over here. We got a little g5, g4. He's like, nah, you can't push these pawns. And Wesley's like, the hell are you talking about? Of course I can push my pawns. Now he's gonna do this. He's sacrificing a flank pawn to damage Anish's flank structure. Very common in endgames. The h-pawn sacrifice to then leave your opponent with just dead weaknesses on the side of the board. Utilize it. Or, I mean, no refunds if you like lose all your pawns and allow a queen though. Okay, gh5, and Anish is like, well, I mean, I can activate my king now. Wesley plays f5. Wesley is so active. It's fascinating. This king is being surrounded by those people, you know, those peeps on e4 and h5, and is like, I can stand up to you. You have no idea who I am. Meanwhile, if you play f3, you just lose. Like, you just immediately get destroyed. So, rook c7, rook h4, and now Anish decides to play the move f3. I just said he can't do that because of this, but he must have thought that he's just defending everything. I mean, who can blame him? I keep saying that, but really, it looks like everything's defended. Here's the problem. Check, and what Anish blundered is the fact that bishops can move backwards, particularly when there's an actual square available. Here, not so sure the bishop can do that. It can put on a kangaroo suit and try, but here, yeah. And this endgame is really all about your weaknesses, like c7, c6, d5, and so on, being offset by activity. Wesley just said, you know what? I don't care if my arm is broken. I'm gonna beat you with it, which is pretty gangster in a fight. I don't know if Wesley's ever been in armed combat or unarmed combat. I don't know why I said armed combat. Unarmed combat, you know, armed combat. Oh my God, this recap is insane. You know, his arm's broken. He's beating him with the broken arm. Has anybody ever done that in mixed martial arts? That's pretty cool. Anyway, obviously he's gonna get in, but it's not over. It's not over. Rook e6, and you know what the idea is? How is Wesley going to break into Anish's position? If you said rook e1 check, you hung a rook. And if you said g4, you're correct. He has to use the pawn. Anish is still taking those weak pawns. The pawn gets through. Once the pawn gets through and the king is glued to the back rank, it's over. Rook h6, now you're threatening any bishop retreat and basically mate. And that's exactly how the game ends. The bishop wraps around, and as the king tries to make a run for it, you know, the bishop knocks on the door on c4. This is kind of like a movie moment. He's like, hi, did you think you were gonna escape? That's adorable. That is so cute. No. So that's how Wesley So defeated Anish Giri. Which takes me to my penultimate matchup of the day between Timur Radjabov and Radjabov Aronian. This is their second rapid game, and we have the bishops opening, but not quite. It just becomes a regular gioco piano. Pianissimo? Yes, c3. So it's a regular thing. I mean, I thought maybe for a moment we would have like a attempt at like a scholar's mate, but knight f6 kind of parries that threat, so we just get like normal stuff. So many different game plans here. I'm not gonna get into them. All right, this is not like an Italian masterclass. In the words of Kanye West, I shop so much, I can speak Italian. I watch grandmasters play so much, I can speak Italian. But what I will say is that it's very trendy nowadays for black to play a5, preventing white from playing b4, and for white to try to threaten to take on c6. This is like the rage nowadays. You're like, haha, I don't want to trade here, but I would trade here because that destabilizes your center and makes your structure weak. And so what black does oftentimes, if white waits too long, is like, now you're stupid for putting your bishop there. White's like, not really, because I'm going to bring my bishop around this way. It's what I wanted all along. Basically, the Italian, the gioco pianissimo, is a gigantic foreplay episode. They're all like, oh, I'm going to get, no, let's come around this way. All right, now we're going to, no, hold on a minute. It takes like 30 moves for a piece to get traded. Literally, in this game, there was tension with these pawns for so long, and finally, it was, look at this. We're adding even more tension now. We need third party to add some pressure here, and finally, a capture has been made, and then bishop a5, and now he doesn't want his rook to be taken, so we have a second capture. All right, things start coming off the board. Rook d1, rook c8, bishop to b1. Radjabov obviously has a nice, annoying presence of a knight on f5, and it's exerting some really annoying pressure on g7. The thing is, if black just takes it, everything falls apart. Like one capture, black loses. Because the knight is under attack. Now this is under attack, this is under attack, and it's done. So, you know, we're looking at this like, oh, these very strong guys are handling this position. One wrong move, it's done. Rook d8. And the thing is, white constantly needs to worry about if one of these sacrifices works. So queen e3 is an interesting move because now you always have tactics on this queen. You always have tactics, and you could be kind of coming, try to come over here if this knight moves. And here Aronian plays king to f8, which is fascinating. I mean, what a move. And then Radjabov uncorks the whole idea of his move. Kabam. What? Well, the idea is that after king takes g7, d takes e5, now if you take my queen, I take check. That was the whole point. That was why he put the queen like this. Now here, both players miss something. Both players miss that the knight can move and guard the queen. Yeah, believe it or not, the knight can move and guard the queen. So now you've given up a knight, you're not going to get the knight back, and the queen's guarded by the knight you were going to take. But we didn't get that, we got this instead. So Radjabov kind of like threw a nasty haymaker, and Aronian was like, oh yeah, wow, that's actually, yeah, that makes perfect sense. And then the game just continued like nothing happened. Now Radjabov is just a pawn up. So all he's got to do is be able to push his pawns forward, attack this king, and potentially win this pawn, and he has to make the right trades. Okay. Make the right trades, right? Told you, make the right trades. Now he won that pawn. Rook c2. All right. Now, if you just take this, obviously the pawn promotes. You don't have to be an idiot to see that. Okay? Rook d2 is a pretty fancy move, though. X-ray defense. You just patrol the whole second rank. Very lucky your bishop's not trapped, but he saw that coming. So rook c1. Check. Nice little in-between move. And now the bishop gets to activate even further than expected. Rook f1, rook f2, rook e1, bishop d3, bishop f5. Pieces are doing a little dance here. And we have a rook trade. And you're never winning b2 because it's protected on a dark square and the bishop controls the rest of the diagonal. So king g3, bishop g4, f5, and he's just pushing the pawns. And of course, Aronian looks to make a trade. Nope. Protected pass pawn. We've seen this earlier. And after rook c2, rook d7, Timur basically said, I can give up this pawn now because my bishop, my rook, my pawn are way too strong. You can win this, but then I'm going to promote to a knight and checkmate you in a few moves. No, he's probably going to promote, obviously, to a, well, queen or rook. And so this was the only game that was decisive in this match, and Timur won it on a tactical bluff. Who would have thought? And that takes me to the final two games of this video, Magnus Carlsen and Hikaru Nakamura. This is their first rapid game, and obviously anytime these guys played a week-long barn burner contest, which was the chess equivalent of a MMA split decision last year. And I mean, anytime they play, it's probably going to be interesting, so let's watch. Rui Lopez, anti-Berlin from Magnus. Hikaru likes to play Berlin because he's just a practical guy. He's like, I'm going to make a draw with black or with white the past few days we've seen. But against Magnus in particular, he has been playing Berlin. So Magnus plays this, and this is an anti-Berlin. You play d3, you trade, and you play castles. And as simple as this looks, the simple pawn structure imbalance with the bishop pair for black, but playing against the very solid structure of white, this is how these positions get played. Hikaru backs up with the bishop to defend that pawn. That's not very common. Knight d2, bishop e6, b3. So b3 obviously has the purpose of playing bishop to b2, and potentially escorting the knight to c4. Knight comes back to d7 because it's very common in these positions to play f6, and now that the bishop is on b2, it makes a lot of sense to build that wall against it. So d4. Magnus tries to break in the center. Hikaru continues the plan with f6. We have takes, and now we see the whole point. He's clarified the position and plays the move queen e2. Dynamically speaking, black is for choice here. Because black now has the open file. Black has the only light squared bishop on the board. And, you know, what black should do here apparently is play moves like rook f4. And the whole point of rook f4 is you actually bait the move g3, which is a massive concession for white. Like last game, we saw one move as a massive concession. G3 is such a drastic weakening of light squares that it's worth it. And if you just leave the rook on f4 and white plays something like rook d1, queen e7, rook f8, g5, queen g7, h5, g4, you just get the ball rolling on the king side, which is sort of surprising why Magnus allowed this. But sometimes to just, pull the trigger so quickly in the first game, he playing blank, Hikaru decides to be solid, plays rook f7, rook f8. It doesn't play rook f4, it doesn't get all, but he still plays rook f7, rook f8. Just that now, as long as the rook is not on the square, there's not a lot of breathing room for the other pieces. But still, his position's great. He's a wonderful position. h6. He could go g5 straight up. I mean, he could go g5. Just straight up g5. And it's kind of a problem. It's not really clear what white's next move is. For example, if white plays knight h2 to stop g4 and stop all this, black comes here. Again, it's not very clear what white's next moves are. So there's h6, knight h2, and Hikaru chooses to play on the other side of the board. That gives Magnus enough time to consolidate with knight c4, queen d3, and f3. Now, this knight is dumb, but don't worry about it. It's not as dumb as you, okay? Relax. Don't insult the knight. I have to stand up for the knight. The knight is fine. It's going to go to g4, potentially trade, and then that light squared bishop will no longer be a thing. Or it will route from f1 and go to e3, d5, etc. By the way, what are we doing here? I mean, this poor bishop rented a luxury apartment and then got developments all around it. It can't see anything now, just cement. I mean, I guess it can go backwards, but okay. Just pretend my analogy made sense. h5 prevents knight g4, but now knight takes d6. Hikaru decides to finally be dynamic. The problem is that now he has some weaknesses. Now, queen d6 is worth it, apparently, but Magnus plays this, looking for this, and trying to take on d6 instead with the rook. We have queen e7, queen g5, and rook f2. Knight f1. I told you, here comes that knight. Now the queen's getting booted with knight h7. This is a big weakness. Knight g6, knight e3, knight h4. The knight is coming. Problem is, what are you attacking? Everything is defended. Rook f1, knight f5. Slowly, but surely, this bishop will come to life. That bishop will come to life either with the loss of the d6 pawn or the move f4. So, as promised. I mean, there's a rook on the other side, right? So you got to play f4. So Magnus has now won the maneuvering battle. He's gotten his pieces to better squares. He needs to break through. A quick tactical skirmish ensues, which lands the position here. And now both sides have 6 pawns. Well, not quite. I mean, it's 5. 5 pawns to 6. Okay, so how is Magnus going to win this game? First of all, you're down a pawn against Magnus Carlsen in endgame. Literally no worse place to be. It's like being on your back against Khabib, or on your front and he has your back. That might be even worse. But anyway, king to g6, king g3, rook f3, king f4. This man escorts the king. He just walks up with the king. He's like, what are you gonna do about it? Like, you play rook d7, try to boot me? I mean, I might even do this. I might even do this. So where's your bishop going? It has no moves. Your bishop is trapped in the middle of the board. Rook f6. Straight up, I just trapped your bishop in the middle of the board. So h4, now g4. Again, controlling this bishop. We have a trade. Now I've created a passed pawn. And you have a pawn weakness, right? So now h4. e5. I told you this was going to happen. Bishop g8, knight f5. Dominant play against this bishop. If you haven't seen my video called 8 of Magnus Carlsen's Unbelievable Endgames, you got to go watch it. This man makes it look easy. Look at that. Look at that. That poor bishop. That poor bishop. Rook d1. Bishop h7. The bishop's getting activated. But these... Who left these pawns here to die? What did these pawns ever do to anybody? By the way, he could have also gone knight c6. But he goes knight d5. Knight f6. And the true sign of any endgame magician is he knows when to play the unspeakable simplifying moves. The engine here gives king e6, king f7. Magnus Carlsen takes the bishop. What? King d6. How do you stop my king from going toward these pawns while your king is completely cut off on the side of the board? There might be some extremely small ways that you can stop this from happening. Rook h6, king c7, rook f6, king b7, rook f7, king a6. Obviously, you need to keep your rook over here. Rook c7, rook d3. You see where Magnus is going? He's going to b7. That's what he's doing. King f5. Hikaru's doing the only thing he can do. Rook b7. Rook e3. Looking to create counterplay. King a7. Rook b3. And now Magnus plays a5. And this is where it's very tricky. It is very tricky now for black to defend this position because b6 is about to get won, and then it's not clear at all. I mean, it basically comes down to one of two moves. Rook b4. Rook b4 is not it. You have to get closer with the king. So, for example, king to e4, rook takes b6, and you try to win this and push your pawn. That's what you have to do because you're going to end up with king and rook versus king and pawn because this rook will sacrifice itself. But this is winning. And even this way, look at that, a6 to take like this. We get this position. I told you this was going to happen. c4, but this is winning. This is winning because in this position, even though king d4 happens, there is this, something like king a5 or king b5. And what happens? You catch the pawn just in time. Now, folks, I don't know if Magnus saw 20 moves ahead when he played knight takes h7, but the engine needs like 2 minutes to catch up. The engine here is like, draw, what an idiot. I mean, obviously you do this. What, so stupid. And then you keep making moves, and the engine's like, it's still a draw if black plays the king walk, dude. It's a draw. And then right around here, the engine's like, oh, shit. And like, it realizes that. So, Magnus wins down to the final pawn, understanding the king and rook versus king and pawn endgame. Not always a win, but in this case, a win by 1 square. They drew the second game, on to game number 3, and we have e4, e5 once again. You're going to notice you're getting a little deja vu here, but now he plays bishop g5. He decides not to put the bishop on b2. Maybe he wasn't so happy with the position that he got from the opening. Also, the guy is a man of variety, and he decides to play with bishop h4 and bishop g5, bishop h4. I would not be shocked if one of the best plans for black is to play g5. Very often in e4, e5 positions, when the bishop is here, black needs to play g5. It just seems like it's like the meta nowadays. So bishop g4, bishop h5, but he just decides to do exactly as Magnus does. Now d4. Yeah, again, you probably need to play g5. But I don't hate long castle. I mean, when you play long castle, it's probably pretty clear you're going to go g5. So rook e1. Now you got to go g5. I don't know what, I don't get it. Like sometimes when Hikaru and Magnus play, there's always these moments when Hikaru needs to play the aggressive move. And it's almost like if he was playing me in Blitz, yo, this dude would rattle off g5. Like he would in the position before that, but he plays it a bit more safe sometimes. It's strange. Like queen e6, and now c4 is a problem because you've walked into d5. c4 is a really tough move, by the way, because there's also c5. It's just a weird move. Like you think pawn takes d4, but now e5. I mean, you just get crushed. So takes. It could be taken. You can take c4. He's just giving it to you. But now this. What? Takes. Okay, so there's a queen hanging, right? And this is hanging. But Magnus calculated one move further. After queen to b5, there's the absolute, like, two things are under attack. You cannot protect both. Danger levels. The extended version. Knight takes c6. Look at that move. Oh my god. Rook takes d1. There is a fork. And the craziest thing is the rooks protect each other. That's sick. And he's going to be a clean pawn up here. So a piece up, not pawn up. In the game, after knight c6, we get this position. And he's not a pawn up, but it really feels that way because the queen cannot guard the castle. All right, no disrespect to the queen. She wearing mad expensive jewelry and she got a bazooka on her shoulder, okay? Now, she's not supposed to guard the castle. You got to have the pawns and the pieces guard the castle. You see? Like this. The queen's not supposed to guard the castle. So the queen tries to trade. Magnus is like, queen trade? Hell yeah. Yes, all I need is one weakness. Bishop g3, b6. Oh. Yes, I will camp out on c6. Rook e8, bishop e5. Just slowly but surely, just improving his position a little bit. Now, glue this, pawn f3. This is, again, the worst place to be against Magnus Carlsen. It's like, you tapped out 2 games ago, right? He taps you out, Khabib style. Now, somehow you're in the same exact situation. Nothing has improved. It's like deja vu. So knight e8, except this time you're not down any pawns, but it really feels that way. h4. Why h4? Because he's either going to take away the movement of 2 pawns and fix them on the same color as his bishop, or you have to play h5. And now this could be a liability in some endgames, and it's really difficult to decide when you play Magnus which is right. And now the man is going to walk the damn king again. When you thought he couldn't improve his position anymore, he plays king g3. So now Hikaru's like, all right, let me create counterplay. Rook c2. This is really interesting. This is really interesting. He backs up and trades. Normally, the attacking side in the endgame does want to trade 1 rook. The side creating counterplay wants to trade, does not want to trade rooks. But sometimes can trade both rooks, because if you accidentally trade too much, could be a draw. Not in this case, because again, those pawns that he made you move forward a couple of moves ago. Rook f7, b4, a4, b5. I mean, the dude is playing on the middle, right and left. Where's left for you to play? Like, where are you going to make a move? Alternate dimension? I don't know. I don't know. Rook a2, rook a8, rook a1 to try to kick you out of the middle and maybe go to c1. He's looking for his way. King f2. Knight d6. Yeah, that's a good move. All right, I'm going to have to take it. King d6, check. Which way is the king going? Back or forward to one of the 2 squares? Decides to go back. Apparently, king e5 a little bit better. Tough to figure out what the hell the king's doing there, though, because it's not going to come here, because g3 kicks it out. King e7, rook c1, king d7, and now the king's gone running. The king's going. Rook a2, pawn to g4, because the king is going to bring the pawns with him, right? So rook a3, defend. This is gone. b5 pawn, you served your purpose. I loved you. I love you. Be well. We're done. King g5, king f7, king h6. Why? This is the idea. This absolute psychopath. This man did not even take the free pawn. He didn't want it. He didn't want this because rook b3 comes. And he evaluated that as not winning. So what does he do? He does this. He locks his king in. It's like, go ahead. What are you going to do to me? You know why? Because I have rook c1, and at any point, I also have f4, f5. Now, I can part ways with the f3 pawn, because c7 is really weak. And when you go back and defend it, rook c6, again, you're suffocating. And there it is, the final tipping point of your position, f5. And I have broken through. I'm now going to win this pawn back. I'm going to win this pawn. You did not take on b5 when you had the chance, so we trade, and I have the 2-on-1. And here Hikaru resigned, because these pawns are simply faster. With moves like h7 check, if king h8, I go here, you get mated. You can get mated in very funny fashion. I can play this move, which is just very disrespectful. And that's mate. And that's mate. So Magnus Carlsen wins an unbelievably clean 2 endgames. Yeah, this man is gross and should probably just shower after this. Sorry for the really long recap, honestly. I was shooting for 30 minutes, but I guess 38 is fine. And, you know, if you made it this far, appreciate you very much. These are the standings after 5 rounds. Magnus maintains his overall 5-point lead. Levan Timur in a tie for 3rd and 4th. Hikaru has a chance to win in rapid, get 3 points and catch up to them. Actually, can be very, very close. And Artemiev and Maxim and Anish are all very close to Hikaru. So the most interesting thing is not about who's going to win this thing, because it seems like it's a guy who's going to be named Magnus Carlsen. But anyway, appreciate you all very much for hanging out with me for 38 minutes. I felt like this recap went very smooth. We made a lot of jokes. There was some instructional moments. And we watched some really good players move some pieces to some squares. Peace out. I'm going to see you for the next round. Get out of here.